You know, the term small fringe minority, you know, it's supposed to be derogatory. And I'm like, haven't people learned anything in history through history in school? You know, a resistance to a corrupt regime always starts with a small minority. It's always a small minority that starts speaking up, you know. And in a dictatorship, they usually stay in a small minority because that's how dictatorships work. You know, the opposition is oppressed, they're jailed, they're incarcerated, whatever, you know. But being part of the small fringe minority is actually a compliment, because it goes to show that you actually have a brain and you use it to think for yourself, and you have come to a conclusion other than what the vast majority of people is being fed.
Today, I had the chance to interview Madame Christine Anderson, member of the European Parliament since July 2nd, 2019 for Alternative for Deutschland, which is aligned with the Identity and Democracy Group. Madame Anderson was elected on behalf of Germany. On March 23, Justin Trudeau spoke at the European Parliament in Brussels, and several members of the parliament responded to him, criticizing his handling of his country.
Premijeru Trudeau, sloboda, pravo izbora, pravo na život i zdravlje, pravo na rad za mnoge od nas, to su temeljna ljudska prava.
The most striking of the reply was that of Madame Anderson. Here is what she replied to Canada Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
So I saw what happened in the EU Parliament. We saw not only you, but a couple of MEP have talked about Mr. Trudeau and his democracy way.
Even in Canada, where 90% of people are vaccinated, and our motto as a country is peace, order, and good government, we saw anti-vaccine and anti-government protests devolve into illegal occupations of our communities and blockades of our borders.
Our coverage from our media here in Canada have called you a far-right person. So what is your reaction faced to that?
Well, what else is new? I'm used to this. You know, I mean, I've been dealing with this for like 8 years now. When my party got founded, initially our focus was, you know, on criticizing the euro and the EU institutions, which, by the way, are not only anti-democratic, they are the very means. They're specifically designed to undermine democracy, abolish, you know, national states, free sovereign people. So back then we were called, you know, enemies of Europe, which is ridiculous. I love Europe. What I don't like and don't agree with is the EU, and that's a pretty big difference. So then it went on to, we were called populists and, you know, right-wingers and the whole shebang. And then it went on to be Nazis, of course, racist, the whole, you know, I mean, a royal flush of isms, you know, it was all there.
And all the other MEP, because we heard some people clapping on their hand after your speech, did some other MEP came to you afterwards? What was the reaction of the parliament?
Well, yeah, there have been quite a few. We actually have formed what we call a team freedom, and it's, you know, from different groups, which is kind of the same agenda. That is not necessarily shared with other members of the respective groups. So we formed this, we call Team Freedom, and we just speak out, against just about anything that is not up to the standard of democracy, freedom, and the rule of law. And there is quite a few issues, we raise our voices about. So yeah, there have been reactions to that. I was surprised actually that I did get more applause than I had hoped for. So that was a good sign right there. But it still remains most MEPs do not dare to say anything out of fear they will be disliked within their political group or party. So that it is kind of difficult, but every once in a while there is, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It isn't that big yet, but hopefully it will get bigger. So yeah, there has been support there. However, the support coming from staff in the House has been huge. Even back then in November, when I spoke out about the mandatory COVID restrictions and all of that.
Whenever a political elite pushes an agenda this hard and resorts to extortion and manipulation to get their way, you can almost always be sure your benefit is definitely not what they had at heart.
That has been absolutely astonishing. Yeah.
And have you been able to see the reaction of Mr. Justin Trudeau when you saw like a lot?
No, I couldn't.
Okay.
No, I couldn't. It was just what was interesting actually was when he spoke. Usually when there's a world leader addressing the House, you can bet the House is packed. There's just any MEP, who has some rank or some name, he will be there. But on that day, I was like, whoa, it was, 10% max of MEP were there. It would not be an accurate description to say they walked out in protest. It was more like they didn't even bother, to give him the time of day to listen to his speech. Now, I was there and I actually made an effort, to listen to what he was saying so I can, attack it later. But to be quite honest, that speech that was so utterly boring, I was not capable of keeping my focus on the words he was saying. I was just so flabbergasted that it was utter nonsense that he was, just reciting, and it was, there was no emphasis on certain words. It was very monotony, it was astonishing. And when he was done, I didn't even feel it was worth booing over, let alone clapping, but I couldn't even boo because it was a nothing.
All of us in this room who are committed to democracy know in our bones that democracy didn't happen by accident, and it will not continue without deliberate, mindful effort.
So you probably see the Freedom Convoy, how Justin Trudeau had.
Okay, so how I reacted to the actions that he actually took over there.
Yeah.
I sat here and I honestly could not believe it. It just went on and on and on. First it was like people supporting, or even lining the street to cheer them on. They were being criminalized at that point. And I'm like, what's going on here? Next thing was, the freezing of the GoFundMe donations. And not only did they freeze them, they basically seized them, not giving it back to the donators, but basically kept them to redistribute somewhere else. So, and then it just, the next step was, criminalizing people supporting them by bringing them food or gasoline or, all these things. And I'm like, this is dictatorship. This is totalitarianism in its purest form, And Solzhenitsyn once said, I've translated it into English now. It's a communist system can be recognized by the way, the leniency they're giving towards criminals, and by the way, they're criminalizing political opponents. And this is exactly what happened. You know, I mean, it was really astonishing to see how dictatorship is unfolding right in front of my eyes, you know. And you could do whatever you wanted. You could speak up against it. You could tell people, look, what's going on over there. You know, this isn't right. This has nothing to do with democracy, fundamental rights, none of it. And, you know, most people, well, but the truckers are basically, you know, keeping the Ottawa in captive, whatever. Really? So what we're talking about here is also a shift that has taken place. And this actually ran through all of the COVID crisis, COVID madness, I should say. You know, fundamental rights are no longer considered inalienable fundamental rights. They are now being considered privileges that the government can or cannot grant you or withhold if you know, don't do what they're saying. So we are actually talking about a fundamental shift as to what we conceive to be democracy, freedom, civil rights, and the rule of law. And this is very traumatic. And, you know, it was just that incident where it really, you know, broke openly for everyone to see. But this has been going on for quite some time, you know. And now, once again, they're stepping up their game, and they don't even try to hide it anymore, you know, that they're illiberal. And this is scary. It's really scary. Yeah, but it just goes to show that any politician will do just about anything, you know, to stay in power. And it's never about the people's best interest. It's always about their own best interest and what serves them best. And yeah, it's just another incident that goes to show just that. So we need to break this intention of theirs to basically deceive people into thinking you're all alone. You know, the term small fringe minority, you know, it's supposed to be derogatory. And I'm like, haven't people learned anything through history in school? You know, a resistance to a corrupt regime always starts with a small minority, because you need there's most of the people, they just go along, basically, you know. It's always a small minority that starts speaking up, you know. And in a dictatorship, they usually stay in a small minority, because that's how dictatorships work. You know, the opposition is oppressed, they're jailed, they're incarcerated, whatever, you know. But being part of the small fringe minority is actually a compliment, because it goes to show that you actually have a brain and you use it to think for yourself, and you have come to a conclusion other than what the vast majority of people is being fed. So me being a part of a small fringe minority, I consider that a quality and a compliment. So I applaud the Canadian truckers. I applaud the people that supported them, that lined the streets, cheering them on, supporting them in Ottawa. I applaud them, because this is what a fight for freedom, democracy, and the rule of law actually looks like. So I applaud them, and I have my utmost respect, and my heart goes out to them.
Thank you so much, Kristen Anderson. It was a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for your time, and thank you for speaking out in the UE Parliament. Thank you.
It was my pleasure. Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting
Bye.
you.
As you know, during the 2 days of dismantle of the Freedom Convoy, a lot of people have been injured, as me. And if you want to help me out with my lawyer to sue for what they did to me, you can do it to standwithalexa.ca. You can donate generously. Thank you so much.